Today, we're cracking open Warren Buffett's 1985 shareholder letter. Now, we're not treating this as just a history lesson. We're looking at it as a practical playbook, a masterclass really, for any serious capital allocator who's dealing with the very real challenges of success. Just look at that number. In 1985, Berkshire Hathaway posted a jaw-dropping 48.2% gain in net worth. We're talking about $613 million. But here's the paradox. That massive success actually created one of Buffett's biggest strategic headaches. So instead of popping champagne and taking a victory lap, Buffett did something remarkable. He immediately told his shareholders to basically forget that number. As you can see from his quote, he called it a Halley's Comet event, a once-in-a-lifetime anomaly that was never, ever going to happen again. And that incredible opening really sets the stage for the core problem he tackles in the whole letter. It's a question that every single successful investor has to face sooner or later. What on earth do you do when your own success makes the game exponentially harder? Buffett laid out two core challenges, these twin dragons of future returns. First, the market itself. There just weren't many of those cheap, undervalued gems he was famous for finding. And second, Berkshire's own size. The company had so much capital that finding an investment big enough to actually move the needle was getting incredibly difficult. To really hammer home that first problem, the market, he told this great little parable about an oil prospector. It's just a perfect illustration of the herd mentality that can grab hold of even the most experienced professionals, right? It gets them chasing rumors instead of fundamentals. For Buffett, this was a clear signal that a disciplined business-first approach was more important than ever. Okay, so let's dive into his first major lesson. And in classic Buffett and Munger fashion, it doesn't come from some huge success. Nope. It comes from one of his biggest failures, the original Berkshire Hathaway textile business. Buffett breaks down this painful capital allocation trap. See, for any single company, investing in new looms and machinery to cut costs seemed totally rational. But here's the catch. Because it was a commodity industry, every single competitor was doing the exact same thing. And all that did was lower prices for everyone. The promised returns, they never showed up. He had a great analogy for it. It's like everyone at a parade standing on their tiptoes to get a better view. Nobody actually sees any better, but man, everyone's legs get tired. So after pouring years of energy and money into patching all these leaks, Berkshire finally just pulled the plug and shut the whole thing down. Now, on the accounting books, the machinery and equipment were valued at almost $1 million. And here is the brutal, brutal lesson. They held an auction for 750,000 square feet of equipment. It brought in a measly $163,000. And after you factor in the costs of the sale, the net proceeds were actually negative. Think about it. Looms they had bought for $5,000 sold for scrap at just $26 each. It is an absolute masterclass in the terrifying gap between what accountants say something is worth and what it's really worth in the real world. And that leads to this crucial takeaway. When a brilliant manager meets a truly terrible business, you know what happens? The business keeps its terrible reputation. As a capital allocator, your main job isn't to be the best leak patcher. It's to find a fundamentally better boat to get into. All right, so let's flip the script. Let's talk about the exact opposite of that leaking boat. This is where Buffett gets into his second core principle for us as investors, and it's all about how to spot those truly great vessels. Just look at the stark contrast on this slide. Buffett highlights three of his star businesses at the time: See's Candies, the Buffalo News, and Nebraska Furniture Mart. Now, to generate an extra $64 million in earnings, those businesses only needed about $40 million in new capital. Meanwhile, for the average American business to get that same result, it would have needed to plow in over $300 million. And that difference, that huge gap, that is the heart of what Buffett calls economic goodwill. You're not going to find this on a balance sheet under tangible assets. No, it's the invisible power of a brand or a franchise that lets it grow earnings without having to constantly reinvest a ton of capital. And that, my friends, is the real engine of long-term compounding. But, owning a great business isn't quite enough. Buffett makes a powerful argument that as an investor, as the owner, you have to be absolutely sure that your management team is rowing for you and not just for themselves. Buffett just brilliantly dismantles the flaw in most stock option plans with a super simple analogy. Imagine a manager has a fixed price option on a business. Well, they're going to profit just from the business retaining its earnings, even if those earnings compound at a really mediocre rate. The reward is tied to just holding on to the capital, not to the manager's skill in actually doing something smart with that capital. Now, Berkshire's system is the polar opposite, and it's designed to reward managers only for what they can actually control. So the head of See's Candies, she gets paid based on how See's performs. Full stop. It makes zero difference if Berkshire's overall stock is soaring or sinking that year. This makes sure that pay is tied directly to skill and operational excellence, not just to hanging around while capital is retained or riding a bull market.
So let's tie all these lessons together. You've got avoiding the bad businesses, finding the great ones, and making sure management is on your side. What does that actually look like in practice? Well, Buffett gives us a crystal clear checklist.
And here it is, the practical playbook. These are not abstract academic theories. This was Buffett's actual real-world shopping list. And that laser focus on consistent earning power, high returns on equity, without a bunch of debt, and just simple, understandable businesses, well, that remains a powerful framework for any capital allocator today. And this brings us to the final, and I think most crucial takeaway from this entire letter. After all the numbers are run and all the analysis is done, it really boils down to one simple question. Are you spending your precious capital patching leaks, or are you finding a better vessel? That was the core lesson from 1985. And you know what? It is still the single most important decision any capital allocator can make.